Okay, in this video, we're going to consider the whole concept behind what we know as absolute advantage. Now, let's just be clear at the beginning. You cannot use absolute advantage to prove that there are gains from trade, and it's much better and important that you can use comparative advantage, but you might get questions in multiple choice questions here on absolute advantage. And also, it just introduces you to the principles that we're going to use when we look at comparative advantage. So the idea behind absolute advantage is that each of the countries, and we're going to look at America and Britain, each of them is much more efficient at one of the goods. In other words, let's take this table here. America could produce 4 televisions, or it can produce 8 washing machines. Now you've got to go back to the principle of the PPF. This is using all of their factors in televisions. They could have 4 televisions being produced with all of their factors, or they could have 8 washing machines. Britain, on the other hand, could produce 8 televisions, or it could produce 4 washing machines. In other words, when you look at this table here, you will see that Britain is much better at televisions, whereas America is better at producing washing machines. Now, you'll note the idea of or here, because this is showing you a typical PPF, which we'll see on the next slide, which is when they're producing, let's take Britain's case here, they're putting all of their factors into televisions, so they're producing 8 of them, or they could produce washing machines and produce 4 of them. They can't do both of those because this is all of the factors here or all of the factors in washing machines. If they didn't specialize here, they don't specialize, then they could put half of the factors in televisions, half in washing machines, and so America would produce 2 televisions, that's half of the 4, and they could produce 4 washing machines, that's half of the 8. Britain could produce 4 televisions, half of this 8, or they could produce 2 washing machines down here. So if they don't specialize, this is what would happen when they go sort of half of the factors in TVs and half in washing machines. It's easier to see that on the next slide. Okay, so this is the slide, as I say, which shows this clearly, I hope. This is when they are, America is producing 4, so America is the red line here. They could produce, with all of their factors in the television industry, they could produce 4 TVs, or they could produce 8 washing machines. They can't produce both of those. They can't do 4 TVs and 4 washing machines up here. There is an opportunity cost. If they have, for example, so let's say they started here and they wanted washing machines, they'd have to give up some televisions in order to produce those, washing machines. Britain, on the other hand, you can see that they can produce their 8 televisions, 4 washing machines. And so, again, if they started here, they would have to give up some televisions in order to gain some washing machines. Typical PPF. So, in this slide here, we're saying what would happen if there was no specialization. And so the easiest assumption to make is that half of the factors are used in each industry. If that's the case, let's look at America. Remember, we said that they could, America, this is the red PPF, they could produce 4 TVs with all of their factors in the TV industry. So if half of them are used in each industry, then instead of that 4, they would only be able to produce 2 televisions, whereas they could produce also, with half of their factors, 4 washing machines. So America can produce 2 televisions and 4 washing machines. Britain, same principle, can produce 4 televisions and 2 washing machines. In other words, here on the blue PPF, Britain could, instead of having 8 televisions, if all their factors were in televisions, they could produce 4 TVs and they could produce 2 washing machines. So overall, the total of televisions is 6, total washing machines is 6 if there is not specialization. Now all you've got to do is you've got to consider what would happen if they specialize. And so each country is going to specialize in the good at which it is most efficient, i.e. which it can produce more of. So Britain would be producing televisions. Just look at this blue line here. Britain is better at producing televisions, more efficient. In other words, it can produce 8 with all of its factors. America could only produce 4. So Britain would specialize in televisions. America, on the other hand, will specialize in washing machines. You see, they can produce 8. Britain could only have produced 4. And so if they specialize, countries specialize, they are going to produce 8 televisions in Britain and 8 washing machines in the US. So have we shown that there are benefits from specializing? Yes. Let's look at this table. Without specialization, if you remember, then we saw that there'd be half and half, the factors half and half, split between TVs and washing machines. So we'd have got 6 TVs and 6 washing machines. But if we specialize here and here, then we can produce 8 and 8. And that will show you that by specializing, there are now more goods and services produced in the world economies. Assumption there's only 2 economies in the world, and that means that there are gains from specializing and then from trading. So Britain in this case would take its televisions and would start to trade with America. Now we won't go into that in this video simply because that's the part that we need to consider when we look at comparative advantage. So hopefully that's given you an introduction to how to use a PPF of 2 countries on one diagram, and that is the way that you need to do this for comparative advantage when you get to the next video. So hopefully that's helpful and it gives you a good starting point.